Thanks very much. I won't be doing this TED style with lots of arm gestures. I'll just be standing here, so very boring, but I apologize. All right, thank you for taking the time to come and hear me talk today. I don't do that much public speaking, but I couldn't really say no to Oxford. Also, I feel the need to avenge my own 2-2, otherwise known as a Desmond, which I received in PPE from Oxford back in those long-gone, simpler times when tuition fees were affordable, a beer at the Union cost £1, and Oxford students weren't the most miserable in the country, as recent newspaper articles have been claiming. I hope you're all feeling happy enough today. The topic at hand isn't the most cheerful one. Yes, I'm here to talk about the DPRK, aka North Korea. It's a country I covered during my time as a journalist. And 2 years ago, I wrote a book about the place with James Pearson, a friend from Reuters. Much of what I intend to talk about today is drawn from that book. Judging by my last royalty statement, only my dad has read that book, and his is the copy I gave to him. So the material, I guess, will be quite new to most of you, I would imagine. We didn't deal much with the geopolitical situation of North Korea. There are plenty of smart and knowledgeable people writing about that. But it's a subject on many people's minds lately. So before getting into the main topic, I will just say that we had a generally skeptical view of how much can be achieved in a geopolitical sense. We view the situation as being quite well balanced and with the potential cost of changing the equation extremely high. The only ones who we think would benefit vastly from reunification would be the least powerful actors, i.e. the North Korean people themselves. That is assuming that reunification does indeed mean absorption into the South. Of course, there's a little bit of talk these days about President Trump actively pursuing regime change, perhaps, or doing something new at least. Perhaps Pyongyang has met its match in having an opponent who uses unpredictability as a strategy, so one never knows. But it's either a fool or a genius who thinks he can understand what's going on in Donald Trump's mind. Regardless, I expect someone else will be stood here in 10 or 20 years' time addressing the International Relations Society about the continued existence of the Kim Jong-un monarchy. Maybe it will be one of you guys here today. Now, time has shown that expecting major events and top-down forces to bring change to North Korea is potentially a way to disappointment. The regime has survived decades of tension with the South. It survived the collapse of the Soviet Union, 2 hereditary transfers of power, a devastating famine, and sanctions, which are always billed as the toughest sanctions ever, though admittedly they're never the toughest implemented sanctions ever. I would love to be proven wrong. I would be overjoyed if the DPRK state imploded peacefully right now. But basing policy on collapsism is not wise, in my opinion. And expecting China to change course on North Korea can seem like wishful thinking at times. The DPRK is actually a fantastically resilient autocracy. The strength of its police state and unfortunate consequent inability of its people to muster opposition is well known. There is no civil society to speak of in North Korea, no non-state organization. Like, you wouldn't just organize even a football team. And no identifiable opposition figure of any kind. Propaganda and the strength of the propagation of the state narrative and the foundation myth of North Korea is probably the greatest of any country in history, unfortunately. It should also be said, as I did before, that the DPRK is now effectively a monarchy. Bloodline has a powerful psychological hold upon people. In many countries, people naturally choose the children of previous leaders, and South Koreans themselves did it in 2012, even though they eventually lived to regret it. Even many North Korean defectors will make statements to the effect that they hope the regime pursues reform, rather than outright saying that they hope Kim Jong-un faces The Hague or is strung up from a tree. There's been no real competing narrative inside North Korea. It can be hard to imagine change coming from outside the system. Please note this is a positive statement, not a normative one. I'm not defending the DPRK government. I detest it with a passion, as anyone should. But I think that regime change is something that we should hope for rather than expect to come anytime soon. I'd also like to say that I think we should view the DPRK as not really a communist dictatorship, though it is a dictatorship. We should view it, in my opinion, as a feudalistic, bastardized Confucian monarchy. It's feudalistic because the state, which owns all land and property, is basically run by a network of families with one particular family at the top. Society is divided into state-created social classes. just like in old Joseon Korea. That's the old sort of feudal era monarchical Korea before the end of up to the end of the 19th century, early 20th century. A socialist friend of mine who often visits North Korea once told me that he wants North Korea to become properly capitalist, because Marx said that after feudalism comes capitalism, and then after capitalism comes socialism. And it's a place of bastardized Confucianism, because under Confucianism, the leader has certain obligations and can be removed if he fails to live up to them. And this did sometimes happen in Old Korea. The king Yeonsangun, the 10th king of the Joseon dynasty, was removed, you could argue, for such reasons. And Kim Jong-il and Kim Jong-un have certainly failed. Their North Korea has all the top-downness and all the patriarchalism, but with none of the responsibility. It's not communist because, one, the level of inequality is absolutely shocking, and two, the state no longer provides for the people, and has not done so since the mid-1990s. The days of Kim Il-sung, one could at least say of North Korea that there was a kind of social contract. Trust in Leviathan, and your basic needs and security against foreign invaders will be taken care of. Many older North Koreans recall the good old days when, if you can believe such a thing, when the country rebuilt itself following the war. The economy seemed to be growing. People had enough to eat, and the sense of national pride that was so shattered by Japanese colonialism was being restored. It's commonly said that Chinese living near the border in the 60s and 70s used to envy North Koreans for their standard of living. It's to Kim Il-sung's great fortune that he lived through that era and died in 1994, just before everything noticeably fell apart. Around then, a confluence of factors led to the breakdown of the old public distribution system, the rationing system, and between 1994 and 1998, at least several hundred thousand and possibly between 1 and 2 million people died. This tragic human cost is clear and well known. But for those who survived, the famine also led to a certain reordering of society. And as such, it's surely the most important event in North Korean social history. Its effects are vast and ongoing and will probably still be felt in 50 or 100 years' time. These effects, as far as we understand them, are the main focus of our book. The most important thing to note is the breakdown of trust between state and people. As I mentioned, there was an implicit social contract in North Korea. Trust and obey the ruling family, and you'll be provided for. It's commonly said that the most loyal North Koreans were the ones who ended up starving in the famine. Those who believed the system wouldn't fail them died, and those who quickly adapted and fended for themselves were more likely to live. Fending for oneself meant trading anything and everything. Suddenly there were professors from elite Pyongyang universities selling homemade soup outside railway stations. People of all walks of life were selling off their household possessions, or heading to the mountains to gather herbs and mushrooms to sell. Prostitution became commonplace. It also meant economic crime. Bankrupt state-owned factories were stripped of anything of value. Officials and police learned how to survive on the proceeds of corruption. Theft became a way of life, from the groups of soldiers who raided people's houses, to the street orphan pickpocket, to the elite officials who siphoned off state resources to feed their families and subordinates. Of course, under the North Korean system, virtually any kind of private business is technically an economic crime. The core lesson people took from this was that following the rules in this new era could literally mean death. This lesson greatly increased the psychological distance between people and state. North Koreans became highly resourceful, much less trusting of authority, and more curious about the world beyond their borders. You may well know this already, so I'll skip ahead to the present day and what the results of this change in mentality have been so far. I'll first discuss the new North Korean capitalism, and then move on to broader effects on how people think and act. I will then discuss the response the DPRK state is making to these in the attempt to stave off any potential loss of power. So, on to the new capitalism. Much has already been written about the so-called Jangmadang. This is the technically illegal but generally tolerated street market. These form the bulwark of the new North Korean economy for the average citizen. Now, these street markets have come a long way. When I went to North Korea in August 2014, one of our guides told me quite openly that he visited these Jangmadang street markets himself and bought a lot of his groceries from them. He was keen to stress that the Jangmadang was a temporary phenomenon on the way back to a proper socialist system. But the fact that he was prepared to even tell a foreigner that he shopped at one did surprise me. There's an expression that you can buy everything but a cat's horn at a jangmadang. Alcohol, Coca-Cola, MP3 players, you name it. Now, cats don't have horns, of course. So here's a photo of a very small food market that I managed to take from the back seat of our bus when nobody was watching. So as you can see, vegetables, fruit on sale here. And the bicycle is also very important because that's the means of conveying these items to the market. And I'll go into more detail later about the importance of bicycles. But yeah, if you get out of Pyongyang or you go away from the main thoroughfares, you'll see a lot of this kind of stuff. Anyway, you'll also see old ladies selling fruits and vegetables and cigarettes on the street pretty much anywhere that's not in Pyongyang. Okay, so these are old ladies selling cigarettes I managed to take a picture of. Now, typically you don't get to see this kind of stuff if you go in as a foreigner or any kind of tourist. These days, you hear of more outsiders coming and seeing this kind of thing, but generally, it's not something that they do want you to see. Anyway, this is just the end of the supply chain. The vast majority of goods sold at street markets come in from China. This is because North Korean products are almost universally considered inferior. With the exception of North Korean beer, agricultural produce and certain cigarette brands, such as 727, which is the one smoked by Kim Jong-un himself. But generally, it's all about Chinese goods or South Korean goods, if possible. They're brought in by those with the power to cross the border. For example, those with elite family backgrounds or those with lots of money to pay decent bribes to the border guards, or to a group of people known as Hwagyo, who are ethnic Chinese North Koreans. Now, this is a very important group of people within North Korea, so I'll just tell you a little bit about them now. There are tens of thousands of these ethnic Chinese North Koreans living in North Korea. The DPRK government has never really wanted foreigners living in North Korea, but the Hwagyo, these Chinese North Koreans, they were already living there before the division of Korea generally, and Kim Il-sung didn't really want to anger China by kicking them out. They were always kind of alienated from the state. They couldn't get jobs in the government, for example, but also as a happy bonus, they were subjected to much less propaganda and self-criticism and all the usual stuff. And they had their own schools as well. Crucially, they could also cross in and out of the DPRK into China. In the days when the state was the economy, Hwagyo, these Chinese North Koreans, were extremely poor, often reduced to begging. But in the emerging capitalist era, they're now rich because they can go to China and they can speak Chinese. They can easily buy the goods that North Koreans want, bring them back, and as long as they're willing to bribe the border guards, everyone is happy. The goods come in through towns on the border, places like Hwaryong or Haesan, and there are port cities as well, like Cheongjin, also that are conduits for imports. People in these places are richer than the average North Korean and more worldly. An apartment in a border town costs a surprisingly large amount of money, as a person living there has trading opportunities that others don't have. People in Cheongjin are known as being particularly fashionable as well. They get first dibs on imported second-hand clothes from places like Japan and other countries. One defector from Cheongjin who we interviewed said that even Kim Jong-un's wife, who you may have seen pictures of, Ri Sol-ju, she looks a bit dowdy in the eyes of young Cheongjin women. Anyhow, goods are moved from border towns to Pyongyang and other cities by a variety of means. One would be the train. Trains in North Korea are full of people moving goods from city to city. Many will be family members of those who sell goods at the market. The North Korean rail network is pretty terrible. Frequent breakdowns and delays mean that sometimes journeys can take a week. And it's a small country, remember. It would be no exaggeration to say that the rail system was better 80 years ago. Police on the trains are also fond of shaking down traders for bribes to allow them to continue transporting their goods. But overall, it remains a relatively efficient method compared to other methods. At the local end, goods are often transported by bicycle. It's very common in North Korea to see a middle-aged lady, an ajumma, riding a bike with a basket full of food. She's probably on her way to the market. That's a guy... This was an uphill path, by the way. So this looks very... he had a very difficult time, I think. Okay, it's a street scene. So you can see, I think she's carrying vegetable oil, perhaps. And if you can see, most people in this picture, they're doing something related to work. Like she's carrying some kind of vegetables there. She's got some some kind of goods. And I think that they're all going to market, basically. And what you'll see is that everyone really in North Korea who is not an elite now is involved in this, or they're living on the proceeds of this kind of grassroots capitalism. Anyway, there are many men who make a living from fixing these bikes. Most people have second or third hand or fourth hand bicycles, and the roads are notoriously bad. That means there's endless demand for bike repair services. Next one, please. Right, so this is a kind of a bike repair stop. And also, mopeds are a big deal in North Korea too. You're doing well if you have one. Many men will say, look to marry a woman whose family can buy you a moped. So if you have this, then you're a player. Right. Okay, as you can imagine, the Changmadang, the street market, isn't just a source of sustenance then for those who trade at them. There's a whole network of people, like the bike fixers, who make an indirect living from it as well. It's no exaggeration to say that the majority of North Koreans now owe their livelihood, directly or indirectly, to such trading and related jobs. The state also takes a piece. Officials go around the markets and they collect bribes to look the other way, since after all market activity is officially a crime. Bribes are generally uniform and effectively function as a tax. As I mentioned, the state economic system no longer works, so that means that government officials need to find their own ways of generating income for their department. Unlike in normal capitalist economies, the money flows upward. The bribe receiver ends up getting some of it, but most goes up to the department level, where the head uses it to pay for unofficial salaries and the general costs of running the department. Eventually, some will make its way up to the Kim family at the top. The total value of such taxes may be around US $1.5 million per week, according to one recent estimate by an academic in South Korea. Anyway, government officials are the linchpin of the new elite capitalism of North Korea as well. This elite capitalism is slightly less well known than the grassroots capitalism that I've just been showing you, and it's probably a little more interesting to talk about. Other than the oldest generation of the North Korean political elites, those in their 70s and 80s now who still believe in socialism and are no doubt shocked at how their country has changed lately, pretty much everybody else wants to get rich. In that respect, they're no different to, say, corrupt officials seeking to abuse their position in any country. As corruption is now a way of life, business activity by civil servants is simply seen as a natural thing now in North Korea. I saw it for myself when I went to Pyongyang. I was invited to speak on marketing to a group of officials at the Grand People's Study Hall. Right, so this is our lecture room, and you can just about see who those people might be in the pictures. And these are North Korean civil servants who have come to listen to us talk about various business-related topics. So there'll be economics, there'll be business law, marketing, accounting, stuff that you would get on an MBA course. I'll tell you a little of my own story now, how I came to do this. 4 years ago, I wrote an article in The Economist when I was still a journalist, stating that North Korean beer was better than South Korean beer. I gained a certain amount of notoriety in South Korea for that. And eventually some friends invited me to join them in setting up a small craft beer firm. Thankfully, we grew pretty quickly. You didn't think I could make a living out of writing books, right? Anyhow, the head of Daedonggang beer, the North Korean beer, heard about me and my article, and thus I came to be invited to talk via an NGO that provides business education, this group, to North Koreans. What they didn't know was I was also writing a book and trying to gather material for it. And that was the real purpose of my visit. I've been looking for a way in for a while, and one that allowed me to meet some of these new entrepreneurial kind of civil service capitalists for myself, and this was perfect. After my presentation, a man approached me with a business plan. He worked for the government and also a state-owned enterprise, a conglomerate that was engaged in consumer retail. They had this flagship chain of something like 100 convenience stores in Pyongyang. So it's like the 7-Eleven of North Korea, or something like that. It was clear his plan was all his own, though. He wanted me to invest $100,000. After all, nobody wants North Korean money. It has to be US dollars or Chinese yuan, for a 50% share of a joint venture craft beer company. He presented me with reams of data about why this was a good idea. but also admitted that his statistics were based on logical guesses rather than real information. Now, the North Korean government isn't big on economic data, and besides, the unofficial economy is the economy anyway, and if you can't measure it, or if you don't measure it, then what can you do? Now, he wasn't the head of his organization, but it was clear he wanted to make his own organization within an organization. As you can see, there's a small number of women, but it's pretty much a man thing as well. You look at the grassroots capitalism, the street market trading is mostly women. But North Korea is it's still quite patriarchal, you would say, and anything involving political power or administrative power tends to be focused on men. Judging by the amount of effort that he put into his plan, he wasn't doing it for the good of the state. Were he able to convince a foreign investor, i.e. me, to cough up 100 grand, he'd have been very much in business. Of course, I didn't invest, but what if I had done? I asked a few people how it would have gone down. Here's how the system works in a rough sense. An ambitious civil servant, i.e. that guy, with political connections comes up with an idea. He, and usually it is a he, as I've said, goes and tells his boss. If he gets the green light, he'll find, if he can find the startup capital, i.e. from family money or a sucker like me, he'll pay a bribe upwards and be allowed to set up a company officially owned by his department. He then conducts business just as one would in any other high context or idiosyncratic environment. If he makes a decent profit, he'll cook the books to make it look like he's just making a small one. The small profit will go to the state, again trickling upwards. You could call this a tax or a bribe or protection money, depending on your view. It's easy to do dodgy accounting in North Korea because there's no proper banking system, there's very few records of anything, and almost everything is done in cash. He'll also have to pay his staff, who are officially government employees. These will be proper salaries, not the infamous $1 a month official government salaries, which they do also get. A manager at a successful company may receive between $300 and $500 a month, which is a very good salary in North Korea. Whatever remains belongs to the entrepreneur. If all goes well, he'll become rich. Now, how rich is rich? He could definitely become a millionaire. I heard of one man engaged in private business in North Korea who is worth about $10 million apparently. He's not even from a super elite family. Now, such entrepreneurs do have this need to keep the powerful on side by bribing and wining and dining the right people. A North Korean entrepreneur has no legal rights, so if he crosses the wrong person or fails to pay due respect, he can lose everything. Sometimes events outside of your control can get in the way as well. Plenty of business people had their careers curtailed by the downfall of Jang Song-taek, who is famously Kim Jong-un's uncle by marriage, who was purged and executed a few years back. The beer entrepreneur I met was relatively small scale. High up people in certain ministries, such as the Ministry of National Defense, they have the privilege of taking on much bigger projects, such as apartment construction. This is a hot industry now because of the new and growing Pyongyang elite who want to live in nice apartments rather than rotten old communist ones with no lifts and dodgy electricity. Here's an example of the new rich Pyongyang. This may surprise you. From the other side of the Daedonggang River, this is a gigantic apartment complex in a neighborhood known to expats as Pyeonghattan. Now, I don't know for sure, but it's likely that Pyeonghattan here was built by soldiers. These days, a lot of construction in Pyongyang is. If you're connected, for example, if you're at the Ministry of National Defense and you have the money, you can pay off a general or some other high-ranking military officer and borrow a team of soldiers from him. The soldiers don't get paid any extra, or in fact, anything at all other than basic rations. It's a completely exploitative practice, but this is North Korea after all. Let's say then that my beer-making friend becomes rich from his business and he wants to live in Pyeonghattan or somewhere similar. There's probably somewhere better now even, I wonder. He can't legally buy an apartment since all property does belong to the state and you're supposed to live in the apartment you've been assigned to. But if he can afford it, he can bribe his way to having his home registration changed and pay the previous tenant to leave. It can be done through an unlicensed estate agent even. For a really nice apartment in Pyongyang, this would cost over $100,000. He may also want a nice car. German cars, particularly Audi, Mercedes, are popular in black and with tinted windows. They're brought in through China in contravention of sanctions on luxury goods. So the elite, sanctions on such products are kind of a joke, actually. They can still get everything they want. There are special shops even near the North Korean embassy in Beijing selling all kinds of high-end electronic goods to North Koreans on business trips. Within Pyongyang itself, there is an Adidas shop with genuine Adidas goods, although it's unlikely that Adidas knows this. This is all just for the 1%, of course. The vast majority of North Koreans are still very poor, though thankfully emerging capitalism means that mass starvation is now over. Whether rich or poor, though, the mentality has changed. People now want to make money and are very practical about doing so. The state used to crack down on marketization, the most far-reaching example being the currency redenomination in 2009. 2 zeros were knocked off the North Korean won, with pretty low conversion limits that basically wiped out the savings of anyone holding even a modest amount of money. Those affected were, well, everyone, but naturally the traders bore the brunt of it. Reportedly, there were civil disturbances, with people even burning the worthless currency they were left holding. Now, Kim Il-sung's face appears on the higher value notes, the 1,000 and the 5,000 won notes. So this is one of them. This is the 5,000 note. Burning one of these would be quite a statement because of the face that you see on it. Anyway, the government's aim was to reassert control over the economy, but the end result was merely to increase the psychological distance between people and state. Citizens also responded by abandoning the North Korean won altogether, since they can no longer trust it. They now favor Chinese yuan or US dollars. The government seems to have drawn a lesson from this. They did their best to distance themselves from the decision to knock 2 zeros off the won, and thus made a scapegoat of the Workers' Party head of planning and economy, 77-year-old Park Nam-gi. No prizes for guessing what happened to him. Since then, there have been no further attempts to ruin the emerging capitalists. According to North Korea specialist Andrei Lankov, this government has done literally nothing that counteracts marketization in the Kim Jong-un era. If anything, the government is now going the other way these days, allowing farmers to keep the majority of what they produce now, for instance, instead of turning it over to the state. In his speeches, Kim Jong-un likes to talk about economic development and a future where nobody has to tighten their belt. There's an official policy of Pyeongjin. This is the military and economic development in tandem at the same time. This will allow him to take credit for rising incomes, even though really it's got nothing to do with him. Similarly, we see sometimes the tacit acknowledgement of the real value of the North Korean won. There's a huge discrepancy between the official exchange rate of 130 to the US dollar and the real one, which is more like 8,000. Yeah. So this is worth about English about 40p maybe, but officially it would be worth a lot, probably I don't know £20 or something like that. Anyway, this is why those state salaries, already bad enough by the official rate, are basically worthless in reality. Thus, salaries at one coal mine, for instance, were increased from the 4 figures to the 6 figures per month, in what seems like an experiment in real market-based pricing of labour. There will be no doubt be many other examples now. One bank, Golden Triangle in Rason Economic Zone, quoted North Korean won by the real exchange rate rather than the official one fairly recently. As a foreigner, you'll mostly see shops that quote prices in the official rate, but all this means is pay in foreign currency rather than North Korean won. Most places use the real rate, but they don't typically let you see them as a foreign visitor. Yet, the regime can't go all the way on capitalism just yet. They fear being unable to control where it will take them. But at the same time, they know that clamping down on it too hard, as in 2009, will cause social unrest and indeed starvation, as the state-command economy is totally bankrupt. My co-author James Pearson likes to compare the situation to a pressure valve. You have to turn the wheel and let out the air, otherwise the whole thing will blow up. But you can't turn it all the way, otherwise the whole thing will blow up then too. So you have to release it slowly and carefully. And it looks like that's what the DPRK state is trying to do, in our opinion. At the same time, they're contending with some other important changes brought on by the famine. Much of these also relate to capitalism in some way. Women's role in society is evolving, for instance. Despite the theoretical idea of gender equality in socialism, the DPRK is old school and is deeply paternalistic. Until the famine, the role of a woman was essentially to get married and produce children. Men were the ones who worked and at state organizations. When rations disappeared, though, it was mostly women who went out and made money. Men were still tied to their official jobs, which paid more or less nothing. Now, these days, it's possible for both or anyone to work. A system has emerged whereby men can bribe their way out of their official job and join their wives in the family business. But women had a bit of a head start and are still considered breadwinners in many families. It's often remarked that people are more cynical now in North Korea and less trusting. And as well they might be, you might say. It's common to hear more of shows of dissent than before. So you see occasionally the videos have emerged of old ladies arguing with and physically pushing officials who are seeking to collect bribes from them as they go about their market business. Overall, mistrust of the regime is much higher than it was before. You'll hear of people saying they still respect Kim Il-sung, but they have no love for Kim Jong-il or Kim Jong-un. One thing that has truly frightened the regime as well is this changing media environment that you may have read about. It's well known that North Koreans now can enjoy foreign films, TV shows, South Korean K-pop even, and occasionally pornography brought in on smuggled CDs, DVDs, and more recently on USB sticks and SD cards. One source told us of setting up a sound system in an abandoned building with some friends where they would dance to K-pop and drink homemade booze. This is a very common sort of party in North Korea. USB sticks and SD cards present a challenge for the authorities. Probably the most common way to watch South Korean drama shows, maybe on what's called a Notel. These are battery-powered combined DVD players with USB inputs as well. You can leave a boring North Korean DVD in the machine, watch what you want to watch via USB, then hide the USB stick when you're done. If the secret police, boibu, that's what they're called, if they come round, they'll only find the North Korean DVD. Many of these devices even have two USB ports, meaning you can copy from one to the other. From one tiny USB stick or SD card smuggled in from China, the whole country could end up watching a South Korean drama. One defector survey that I saw said that 90% of people with SD or USB drives did copy and share files with others. Now, young North Koreans are now liable to using South Korean slang, dressing in approximations of South Korean fashion. And there's even a slight amount of sexual liberalism now that is possibly the result of incoming South Korean cultural product. North Korea has been a very conservative society in comparison to the South. Recently there's been a trend towards housewives renting out their homes by the hour to eager young couples. We heard this from multiple sources about this new cottage industry, which exists at the confluence of emerging foreign media flow and emerging capitalism and social economic liberalism. Increasingly, young men are expected to be romantic and expressive with emotions as well. This is largely the result of South Korean drama making its way into North Korea. Foreign media also encourages defection. In the immediate wake of the famine, defectors were those who were essentially starving. But these days, many are inspired by South Korean TV shows, which show a relatively glamorous free world. Like rising capitalism, South Korean TV, new technology, defection, general foreign cultural influence threaten the existing social order and further weaken the people's trust in the state. If you want to know more about these, I'd recommend reading Baek Ji-eun's book, North Korea's Hidden Revolution. Is that you? Hello. Yeah. She's a proper academic, unlike me, and I'm delighted to say that she is here today. Anyway, when we wrote our book, that's me and James, when we wrote our book, we were a little more positive on the ability of these trends to bring about beneficial change in North Korea. Though even at the time, we made the assumption still that they wouldn't likely present an existential threat to the regime. We think it's important to state that social and economic change doesn't necessarily mean political change. Though the social changes occurring and economic changes occurring in North Korea themselves are very welcome. We should still try to flood North Korea with outside information and also corrupt its system with as much capitalism as possible, in my opinion. But since we wrote, though, it's become clear that the state has also tried, and in some cases has been quite successful in responding to these trends. Part of that response has been the traditional brutal crackdown. Multiple sources will say that punishments for illegal border crossing, for example, or the use of Chinese mobile phones up at the border, or the viewing of South Korean media, punishments for these have been increased. A Group 109, it's a cross-agency group that investigates the consumption of foreign media, has been expanded greatly. Some defectors also say that you used to be able to watch foreign TV shows more freely, but now you keep your door locked and you watch them alone. But beyond that, authorities are finding newer and subtler ways to control and even co-opt social and technological change. This is certainly true of the mobile phone. These days, most adults under the age of 50 in Pyongyang have mobiles. In fact, you're a bit of a loser in Pyongyang if you don't have one. Throughout the country, over 3 million people have mobile phones. Now, there are two main networks. The first is Goryeo, and this was established by an Egyptian conglomerate called Orascom in 2008. The second one is Byeol, that means star, and that's a purely local one established 2 years ago. Now, Orascom owns 75% of Goryeo, but they haven't been allowed to pay themselves a single won in dividends yet. So you can see why I wouldn't want to invest in that craft beer operation. Anyway, mobile phones are particularly beloved by the new entrepreneurial class, who use them as a tool for business. Instead of holding back the growth of the mobile network to frustrate the new capitalists and prevent people from organizing any sort of group activity, something any dictatorship would fear, the authorities have embraced the phone, but in a carefully controlled fashion. Even getting a phone isn't easy. You have to apply. It can take about a month to be approved. Though, of course, in today's everything has a price North Korea, you can bribe your way to instant approval, though. North Korean phones can't make or receive calls overseas. Even foreigners living in Pyongyang cannot call North Koreans on their mobiles. We had a really difficult time arranging meetings with North Koreans. We'd have to get a North Korean who liked us to make the call, then arrange to meet with the person, they would arrange to meet with the person that we wanted to see. Then we would go to the same place at the same time and meet them by accident. Nowhere else in the world is like this. Now, SIM cards are registered to particular phones as well. If you switch them, the authorities will know. And they may keep an eye on you, or they may just call you up immediately and say, what are you doing? Surveillance of the network is also predictably strong. There's real-time monitoring of text messages and phone calls. They also look out for the presence of South Korean slang in people's text messages. The authorities encourage the use of smartphones, which are a status symbol, like the moped. You can't connect to the wider internet on a smartphone in North Korea, but you can access Kwangmyeong, which is a kind of North Korean intranet. And you can download apps, but not in the conventional way. When I was in Pyongyang, I was surprised to hear from one of our guides that whenever she wanted to get a new app, she went to the phone shop and gave them her phone and some money, and they would physically install the chosen app on her phone. North Korea uses Android rather than iOS. Here's an advert for a North Korean Android smartphone I saw. The marketing is quite interesting, is that they're saying it's the utility, the usefulness is very high. So that there's no culture of slogans and jingles or sort of clever marketing. It's purely this phone is good because it is fast or because it is effective or something like that. It'll be interesting to see how that develops as North Korean business culture develops. Anyway, the environment for these Android phones, though, is more like an extreme version of Apple's walled garden. There's no wider internet access and no non-North Korean app that you can just download. In this way, the North Korean state is trying to satisfy people's demand for technology without giving up control. That's why my guide didn't have Instagram, despite the fact that she really wanted to have it, and she kept talking about it. Now, Red Star, the OS used in Korea's smartphones, tablets, computers, it's becoming a formidable weapon against the spread of foreign media. Following a mandatory 2013 update to the OS, North Koreans suddenly found their phones running more slowly. Some found that their foreign media files, K-pop songs, for instance, were liable to automatic deletion. Now, a signature system has been implemented, whereby all officially allowed content is given a digital signature. On the version of the OS mentioned just earlier, any media file that doesn't have the signature can be automatically deleted. Other versions are more sinister. Any file without the signature in another version is stamped by each device it comes into contact with. Now, let's say you have a K-pop song on your Red Star OS device. Your device stamps the file with an identifier, so that if you bought the device from an official outlet, if it's an official device, you can be identified and caught. Let's say that your friends copy that file, though, and their friends copy it too, and so on. 6 degrees of separation later, there's a lot of people with that file. If just one of them gets caught, then agents can identify every device down the line and bust you and everyone else. So quite naturally, this makes people think twice about sharing. Now, these two strategies, automatic deletion and tracing, would seem to contradict each other. It's hard to say that if there's been a change of strategy, there's no clear strategy at all, or whether an experiment is underway to see what would be the most effective. Regardless, it confirms that technology isn't always going to be the force for openness that we often assume it to be. As in China and even the Western world these days, technological advancement can sometimes be a weapon used by authority against people. Here's another method being used, random automatic screenshotting of Red Star OS Android phones and tablets. You can't delete those screenshots, and agents can come anytime and check what you were looking at. Now, built into the OS is now anti-tamper code, meaning that if you are smart enough to disable any of the security features, your device can be locked or stuck in an eternal reboot loop. For more information on this, there's a report called Compromising Connectivity by a group called Intermedia that goes into quite a lot of detail about this kind of stuff. So if you're very interested, then please take a look at that. Now, these days, North Koreans are less likely to inform on one another due to the people's loss of love for the leadership. We can therefore, I think, expect the DPRK state to rely more and more on such technological means of tracking and censorship in the future. The intention would be to rely less on traditional informants and then encourage people to use the official devices rather than ones brought in through China, for example. Now, there's still definitely a gap for the authorities where it comes to these DVD USB players that are brought in from China. The Notel, the device I mentioned before, because they don't run any kind of OS like Red Star. If you copy a file from your illicit device onto a USB stick and give it to someone with an official device, and they use it on their official device, and that person later gets traced, then it may come back to you anyway, because if that person is caught, then they may give you up, unless they're a very wonderful person. And you know what the North Korean authorities will do to people. So I wouldn't be surprised to see, actually, the DPRK introduce some kind of limited version of the internet in the next few years. Right now, it's only available to a small number of people in controlled environments and a tiny number of elite families. But the North Korean Enara internet browser already has a feature to allow any approved websites. And like China's so-called Great Firewall, they'd have the ability to block foreign websites at will. Once the authorities are confident that they have enough capacity to monitor what people are doing online as well, the internet can actually be a net positive for the states against the people. Either they could do this, or they could expand the intranet service to the point that it feels like the internet. What's more, it would also give people, either way, it would give people the illusion that they are being granted more freedoms. Probably for the same reason, dress restrictions for women have been liberalized in the Kim Jong-un era. You'll now see women wearing proper makeup or stylish clothes and shorter skirts than before. This is something that both young women and obviously young men want. And it's something that doesn't really cost the government very much in terms of political power. I think there's a greater emphasis on style and fun and youthfulness these days. The Moranbong band, that's a girl group, is clearly nowhere near as cool as any K-pop group in South Korea if you're a teenager. But they're definitely a lot funkier and sexier than popular North Korean groups of the past. Pyongyang is full of new attractions now, such as this dolphinarium. This is emblematic, I guess, of new kind of North Korean entertainment. Things like this, or there's a ski resort called Mashik that was, I think it was 2014 that opened. There was a big fuss about that in North Korea. You could draw parallels between this strategy and actually a South Korean dictator of the 1980s, Chon Do-won. He had this strategy called 3S, sex, screen, and sports. And now, like Kim Jong-un, that guy, Chon Do-won, he tried to distract people by entertaining them, as well as pursuing economic development. Now, one cannot say that Kim Jong-un has been objectively successful at either of those things, but at least it appears to be his intention. Now, to come back to my main point, though, I do think he will be successful enough at navigating the wave of emerging capitalism and social change triggered by the so-called arduous march, or the famine of the mid-90s. It's true, I think, that North Korean society is changing. It's becoming a little richer and more livable for the average person. It's also becoming more cynical, more capitalistic, more worldly. North Koreans are now thoroughly aware that South Koreans and Chinese are richer than they are. They know how corrupt, they know how cruel their government is. They're aware that other countries are run in different and better ways. But we should be careful in looking for the system to collapse from within under the weight of that contradiction. Now, political control and punishment of dissent against the ruling family is as strong as ever. Now, socially things may change, or economically things may change, but the government appears to have this strong red line against any criticism of the state, and particularly the ruling family. And it's still very, very difficult to imagine people criticizing the government or any kind of opposition to how things are run. Now, as I mentioned, North Korea is more like a monarchy, I think, than a conventional dictatorship now. Many people expect change, but I think they're also completely used to that monarchy, and they expect change within the bounds of that monarchy. North Korea, or the north of Korea before, has never been run in a way that gives its people rights. And let's not forget, this monarchy has already survived a lot in the past 7 decades. There are very few people alive who can remember anything else there now. Technology is posing a challenge to the regime, but it also presents further opportunities for surveillance. Capitalism similarly provides opportunities as well as threats to the state. It's the elite who are in the best position to get rich from it. And since cash is the new ideology of North Korea, those who have a lot of it will be able to increase their power relative over everyone else. Before I finish, I'd like to say one thing about social class as well in North Korea. The DPRK divides citizens into 3 main social groups, with the so-called 핵심 core class getting a level of privilege once extended to elite Yangban class of feudal Korea up until the late 19th century, roughly speaking. As in a feudal society, class is conferred by parentage in North Korea. Until recently, if you're of a lower class, you'd have been destined for a life of poverty and quasi-servitude. The new capitalism, though, is enabling a generation of non-core class people to rise up. This itself is wonderful. Corruption, something that we rightly oppose in any normal country, enables anyone in North Korea with a little bit of cash to circumvent the unfairness of the DPRK's class system. You can't pay to change your class, but you can buy the effects of being in a higher class. You could bribe your way into a government job, for example, or a university place for your son or daughter. But what we also see is a very strong tendency for those newly wealthy, lower and middle class citizens to marry their children into elite families. The ideal couple these days is a union between the children of one politically connected family and one rich family. Political power provides opportunities and security to a business person, and money, of course, provides the lifestyle everyone wants. We are thus seeing the beginnings of a rising merchant class, but so far one which seeks to join the system rather than bring it down. In the 1590s, Joseon Korea suffered terribly as a result of a series of Japanese invasions known as the Imjinweran. Hundreds of thousands of people died. As a secondary consequence, many upper-class families lost their power or assets, while a new generation, a new class of merchants emerged. The system continued, though. Merchants would marry into or simply buy their way into the family books of elite families. Now, over time, the state was replenished with new blood. What eventually emerged was a somewhat more forward-thinking state, but one that was still ruled by the same royal family. Now, obviously the pace of change and level of complexity everywhere in the world now is incomparably greater these days. I clearly wouldn't expect the Kim dynasty to last as long as the previous one, Joseon royal family of North Korea, of old Korea. But I think the near future for North Korea does involve gradual economic and social liberalization, but no political change whatsoever, sadly. I hope to be proven wrong. Thank you.